Sometimes, life throws us curveballs when we least expect them, and a Thursday night at what used to be the peaceful Rusty Anchor, our safe haven in the heart of Pensacola, Florida, was one of those times. That night, the first punch took Arthur down faster than any of us expected. One moment, my 73-year-old buddy was standing his ground. The next he was sprawled across the sticky bar floor, a dark patch of blood pooling from his split lip. "That's how we treat dinosaurs who don't know when to shut up," laughed the biker with fury tattooed on his right hand and chaos on his left. A big bastard, leather vest straining against a beer gut, a pirate flag patch on his sleeve. Arthur spat blood, his arthritic hands struggling to find purchase on the floor. A Korean war vet, decorated with 2 bronze stars, reduced to crawling at the boots of a bar thug. My fingers trembling with a mix of rage and essential tremors as I reached for my smartphone. The screen blurred through my cataracts, but I didn't need to see clearly to send the text I'd drafted hours ago when those Peninsula Marauders MC thugs first started causing trouble. SOS, VFW Post 314, code, family reunion. The response came almost immediately, with the punctuality only true veterans understand. Cavalry inbound. 20 minutes. Hold position. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked across the table at George and Walter. Our silent consensus was crystal clear. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a bar fight, but we'd faced worse odds in the jungles of Vietnam. "Listen here, son," I said to the big man, my voice steadier than my shaky hands. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Veterans of foreign wars post 314 had been our sanctuary for decades. Every Thursday, promptly at 7 p.m. sharp, 5 old soldiers gathered at the corner table to drink cheap beer and share expensive memories. Me, Arthur, George, Walter, and Samuel. What remained of a once larger circle, whittled down by time and illness. We weren't the only vets who used the place. Scattered around the bar were men and women from more recent conflicts. Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan. But Thursday nights belonged to us, the last of the Vietnam generation in our town. Tonight had started like any other. Arthur complaining about his new heart medication. George showing off pictures of his newest great-grandchild. Walter nursing a single beer to make it last the evening. Fixed incomes didn't stretch to second rounds anymore. Samuel hadn't shown for the 3rd week in a row. Hospice care had a strict schedule, and visiting hours ended at 5 p.m. The Peninsula Marauders MC arrived around 8 p.m. Half a dozen men in leather cuts displaying their club patches. Clearly not local, just passing through, looking for entertainment in a town with limited nightlife options. They'd been loud but tolerable, until they noticed Arthur's Vietnam veteran cap. "Hey, Pops!" The leader, who they called Heavyhand, called across the room. "Your hat says Vietnam. Are you one of them baby killers or just a cook who scraped from the latrines?" The bar went quiet. Arthur, who'd survived 2 tours and came home with shrapnel still embedded in his back, turned slowly in his seat. "Son, I'd suggest you enjoy your drink and leave the past where it belongs." "Sounds like a coward to me," Heavyhand smirked to his buddies. "Real warriors don't mind talking about their kills." I put a restraining hand on Arthur's arm. His blood pressure was already a medical concern, and a confrontation wouldn't help. "Let it go," I murmured. "Not worth it." But Heavyhand wasn't finished. He sauntered over, beer in hand, towering over our table. "You boys look like you're past your expiration date. Why don't you clear out, let real men use this table?" George, the diplomat of our group, tried next. "Plenty of tables available, friend. We'll be done soon enough." "I'm not your friend, old man," Heavyhand growled, then deliberately poured beer over George's photographs. "Oops. Guess your little brat's pictures got wet." That's when Arthur stood up. 5 feet 8 inches of elderly defiance facing down 6 feet 0 inches of tattooed aggression. "You need to leave," Arthur said quietly. "Now." The punch came without warning. Heavyhand moved fast for a big man, his fist connecting with Arthur's jaw, sending his glasses flying. And that's how we found ourselves in a standoff. Arthur bleeding on the floor, 5 other bikers moving to surround our table, and the rest of the bar patrons suddenly finding reasons to look away. The young bartender was already reaching for the phone, but who would he call? Local police were 20 minutes out from anywhere, And we didn't have 20 minutes. What we did have, however, were reinforcements of our own. You have no idea what's coming, Walter said calmly, speaking for the first time that evening. The quietest of our group, he'd served as a sniper, 3 tours. His confirmed kills remained a number he'd never shared, even with us. Heavyhand laughed. What's coming? Heart attacks. Ambulances. Bedtime. I helped Arthur to his seat, pressing a napkin to his bleeding lip. George, how's your grandson doing at Fort Liberty? George dabbed at his soaked photographs, his voice conversational. Finished Ranger School last month. Deployed to the base about 20 miles north, along with about 50 of his closest friends. Is that right? I turned to Walter. And your granddaughter? She's still flying those Apache helicopters. Walter smiled thinly. Made captain last year. Very protective of her grandpa. The bikers exchanged glances, sensing something beneath the casual conversation. What the hell are you old-timers talking about? Heavyhand demanded. Just catching up, I said, checking my watch. Funny thing about veterans, we're never really alone. You threatening me? Heavyhand leaned in, breath stinking of whiskey and bad decisions. Not at all, I replied. Just suggesting you might want to finish your drinks and move along before the bar's front door crashed open with military precision. 5 soldiers in Army combat uniforms entered. Not rushing, but with purpose. Young, fit, radiating controlled tension. Their eyes scanned the room with professional efficiency before locking onto our table. Grandpa. The tallest one called out. You okay? George waved. Over here, Ryan. Having a bit of a situation. Ryan strode across the bar, accompanied by 2 male and 2 female soldiers. No weapons visible, but they moved with the absolute confidence of trained combatants. This him? Ryan asked, stopping in front of Heavyhand. At 6 feet 3 inches, Ranger qualified and combat tested, Ryan made the biker look small despite their similar builds. This gentleman, George said mildly, thought it appropriate to assault Arthur and destroy family photographs. Ryan's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. That right. Heavyhand, to his credit, didn't back down immediately. Bar dispute, not your business, soldier boy. See, that's where you're wrong, Ryan replied. Arthur served with my grandfather in the Mekong Delta. Saved his life twice. He nodded toward me. Jack here was my grandmother's brother's best friend. Walter taught me to shoot when I was 12. His gaze hardened. So this is very much my business. The bar door opened again. More uniforms. 10, then 15, then 20 men and women, different patches and insignia, filing in quietly. What the hell is this? One of the other bikers demanded. A woman in captain's bar stepped forward. Dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, posture perfect. I'm Captain Olivia Wilson, Walter's granddaughter. Just a few calls, I explained. Word travels fast among military families. The bar had transformed in minutes. Where there had been indifferent civilians looking away from conflict, now stood a wall of uniforms. Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy. Young faces with old eyes. Veterans from recent wars standing in quiet solidarity with veterans from older ones. Nobody called the cops, Heavyhand said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Didn't need to, Arthur replied, still dabbing blood from his lip. We called family. Captain Olivia Wilson approached our table, kneeling beside Walter. You okay, Grandpa? Walter patted her hand. Fine, Lizzie, just some excitement to break up the evening. She turned to assess Arthur's injury with professional detachment. Need medical attention, sir? It's Arthur, he corrected. And no, had worse shaving. Meanwhile, Ryan and 2 other soldiers had positioned themselves between the bikers and our table. Not threatening, not advancing, just standing firm, creating a buffer zone of disciplined muscle and combat experience. Heavyhand looked around, realizing how quickly the situation had changed. His crew of 6 now faced at least 30 military personnel, with more arriving by the minute as texts and calls spread through the nearby base. We don't want trouble with the military, he muttered, bravado deflating. Should have thought about that before assaulting decorated veterans, Ryan replied. Arthur there has 2 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star. George was at Key San for the entire siege. Walter served 3 tours as a sniper. Jack was a medic who saved more lives than you've probably met in your lifetime. How was I supposed to know? Captain Wilson interrupted. That's the point. You saw old men and assumed they were easy targets. Never occurred to you they might be more than their age suggests. The biker with Prospect on his cut, youngest of the group, barely out of his 20s, tugged at Heavyhand's arm. Man, let's just go. This ain't worth it. Heavyhand shrugged him off, alcohol and pride still overriding good sense. We ain't done nothing illegal. He fell down, that's all. A new voice entered the conversation. It was the VFW post commander, a retired Marine colonel named Patrick O'Connell, who'd been watching from the bar's office. Actually, I have clear video of you assaulting a patron, he said, holding up his phone. Normally, I just call the police, but since family is handling it. He looked at Captain Olivia Wilson. How would you like to proceed, Captain? She considered for a moment. I think education might be more valuable than prosecution. Colonel O'Connell nodded, then addressed the bikers. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to these gentlemen. You're going to pay for any medical attention Arthur needs. You're going to replace the damaged photographs. And you're going to spend tomorrow at the VA hospital, volunteering with wounded warriors. Or, he gestured to his phone, I send this to the county sheriff and you spend tomorrow in jail. Heavyhand looked ready to argue until Ryan took a half step forward, his ranger tab visible on his shoulder. Choose carefully, Ryan suggested quietly. The fight visibly drained from Heavyhand. Fine. Sorry about your lip, old-timer, and the pictures. Arthur nodded, accepting the apology with more grace than I would have managed. Good start, the colonel said. Now about tomorrow's volunteer session. After the bikers had been escorted out with clear instructions for their community service, the atmosphere in the bar transformed. What had begun as our quiet weekly gathering became an impromptu reunion across generations of warriors. Ryan pulled up a chair next to George, examining the damaged photographs. I can get these reprinted, Grandpa. Digital backups, remember. George smiled. Always prepared, just like I taught you. Across the table, Captain Olivia Wilson, Lizzie, was checking Walter's blood pressure. Once a medic before becoming a pilot, she never visited without making sure his health was on track. 135/82, she announced. Not bad for all the excitement. Walter patted her hand affectionately. Takes more than bar thugs to rattle me. The other service members had distributed themselves around the VFW, buying drinks, sharing stories, bridging the gaps between wars and generations. A young Marine was listening intently as Arthur described Key San. 3 Army lieutenants sat captivated by Walter's understated account of sniper operations. I found myself beside a staff sergeant with 3 deployment patches, comparing field medical techniques across decades. Tourniquets are back in, he explained. Full circle from your day. Some lessons get relearned the hard way. I agreed, I said. Colonel O'Connell pulled up a chair at our table. Jack, been meaning to ask. You coming to the school's program next month? Need Vietnam vets to talk to the high school kids. Still trying to recruit the next generation? I teased. Still trying to help them understand sacrifice and service, he corrected. These kids think history started with 9/11. They need to hear from your generation while they still can. His words hung in the air, the unspoken reality of our dwindling numbers. Arthur broke the momentary silence. I'll do it. About time I shared some stories. Me too, George added. Walter simply nodded his agreement. I looked around at the unlikely gathering. Gray-haired veterans from conflicts long faded from public memory sitting alongside young warriors still actively serving. The continuity struck me powerfully. How the thread of service connected us across decades and battlefields. Count me in, I told Colonel O'Connell. Might as well make ourselves useful while we're still vertical. Ryan laughed. Grandpa says you'll outlive us all, out of pure stubbornness. Your grandpa knows me too well, I retorted. The night grew late, younger service members gradually departed, returning to base or homes, each stopping to shake hands or exchange words with us before leaving. The atmosphere of crisis had evolved into something like a family reunion. Arthur, lips swollen but spirit intact, raised his beer to absent friends. Samuel sends his regards, I told the group. Hospice says he's comfortable. Might try to arrange a visit if he's up to it next week. George nodded solemnly. We should go. All of us. The weight of Samuel's situation settled around the table, our circle growing smaller, the inevitable march of time that no amount of battlefield courage could halt. Captain Olivia Wilson, Lizzie, returned from seeing off the last of her soldiers. She stood behind Walter's chair, hands resting protectively on her grandfather's shoulders. Need a ride home, Grandpa? Walter shook his head. Ryan's taking all of us. Monthly tradition. He drives us here, makes sure we get home safe. She bent to kiss his cheek. Good. I'll stop by tomorrow with those medications we talked about. Then, to all of us. Gentlemen, it's been an honor. Try to stay out of bar fights for at least a week, please. After she left, we sat in comfortable silence, finishing our drinks. Quite a cavalry response, Arthur mused, touching his swollen lip. Think we overreacted. Proportional response, Walter countered. They had 6, we had 30. Still good tactics. Superior numbers, strategic positioning, clear chain of command, George added. I thought about how quickly our text messages had mobilized what amounted to a small military operation. Young service members dropping whatever they were doing to rush to the aid of old veterans they might not even know personally. It's more than just family, I said. It's the bond. Ryan returned from walking Lizzie to her car, ready to head out. Old-timers, past your bedtime. Arthur stood, wincing slightly. Watch it, youngster. We can still take you. After what I saw tonight, I believe it, Ryan laughed. Then, more seriously, those bikers are lucky you called us instead of handling it yourselves. Walter snorted. We would have one at your age. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Age just means we have less to lose, Walter replied, his sniper's eyes momentarily cold, and more experience hiding bodies. Ryan's laugh faltered slightly, unsure if his grandfather's friend was joking. George gathered his damp photographs. Don't tease the boy, Walter. As we made our way to the door, the bartender, a veteran himself from the Gulf War era, called out, Same time next week, gentlemen. Wouldn't miss it, I confirmed. Outside, the night air carried a hint of approaching autumn. Ryan helped Arthur navigate the steps while George and Walter moved with the careful precision of men whose bodies had betrayed their still sharp minds. You know, Ryan said as he opened the van door, those bikers will be at the VA hospital tomorrow. Captain arranged for them to spend time with recent amputees and TBI patients. Educational experience. Fitting, Arthur nodded. Though I almost feel sorry for them. The bikers. Ryan asked. No, Arthur grinned, despite his split lip. The wounded warriors who have to put up with those idiots. We laughed as Ryan helped us into the van. Old soldiers being cared for by the generation we'd once protected. The cycle of service and respect continuing despite a civilian world that often failed to understand either. Next Thursday would find us at the same table, drinking the same cheap beer, sharing the same precious memories. But something had shifted tonight. A reminder that though our bodies had weakened, the Brotherhood remained strong. We had fought our wars decades ago in jungles and rice paddies far from home, but tonight's small battle on familiar ground had reaffirmed what we'd always known. Old warriors never truly retire, and they never fight alone. That incident at the Rusty Anchor was more than a bar fight. It was a demonstration of the profound bond that unites veterans, a bond that transcends ranks, wars, and generations. The speed with which the code family reunion spread, mobilizing dozens of young service members, showed the strength of the Brotherhood formed on battlefields that remains alive throughout life. I remember watching those young soldiers, Marines, and pilots mingling with the older veterans. The respect in their eyes, the curiosity in their questions as they listened to Arthur's stories about Vietnam, Walter's about his sniper missions, and my own experiences as a medic amidst chaos. It wasn't just a duty. It was a genuine connection, a mutual recognition of shared sacrifices and experiences. It was as if the walls of the rusty anchor had expanded to embrace not just our group of friends, but an entire family tree of service. The conversation I had with the staff sergeant, the one with the multiple deployment patches, remained etched in my memory. We talked about tourniquets, about how field medical techniques had evolved and, in a way, returned to their origins. Some lessons get relearned the hard way, he had said, and I agreed. History, even the medical history of a battlefield, has its cycles, and the wisdom of elders often proves timeless. That dialogue between a Vietnam veteran and an Afghanistan veteran underscored a fundamental truth. Experience, especially in combat, creates a universal language that few outside of it can truly understand. Colonel O'Connell, with his keen insight and sense of purpose, reminded us of the importance of sharing our stories. His insistence that we participate in the school program, talking to teenagers about sacrifice and service, resonated deeply. These kids think history started with 9/11, he had said. They need to hear from your generation while they still can. It was a subtle yet poignant reminder of our mortality, our gradual dwindling. But it was also an invitation to ensure that the legacy, the moral of all we lived through, would not be forgotten. Arthur, despite his swollen lip, was the first to agree. It's about time I shared some stories, he said. George and Walter nodded, their expressions serious but with a twinkle in their eyes that showed conviction. For us veterans, it's not just about reliving the past, but about forging the future, passing the torch of service and understanding to the next generations. After all, history is more than just dates and events. It's about the lives that shaped them and the lessons they left behind. That moment at the Rusty Anchor wasn't just about defending our friends, but about reaffirming the importance of our history and our continuing role. Autumn deepened in Florida, but the warmth of that reunion at the Rusty Anchor still reverberated in our hearts. That night, the bar brawl became a powerful allegory for our existence as veterans. No matter how distant the wars may seem in the rearview mirror, the fighting spirit, loyalty, and readiness to protect our own remain unshaken. Arthur, George, Walter, and I are living proof of this. The bikers' visit to the VA hospital, arranged by the astute Captain Wilson, was the icing on the cake. I almost feel sorry for them, Arthur quipped, and the laughter that followed filled the quiet interior of Ryan's van. Yes, we'd feel sorry for the wounded warriors who had to put up with those bullies. It was the kind of dark yet truthful humor that only those who have seen hell truly understand. That Thursday had begun like so many others, a sacred ritual of friendship and memories. But it ended as a profound reaffirmation of something greater. The brotherhood that binds us. We, old warriors, never truly retire. Our battles may have been fought in distant jungles or dusty deserts decades ago, but the commitment to service, and to each other, never ceases. And so, as Ryan drove us home, a comfortable silence fell over us. We were already imagining next Thursday, at the same table, with the same cheap beer, and the same precious memories. Because for us, the fighting may be over, but the vigil never ends. And one thing is for sure, veterans never fight alone. If this story of veteran brotherhood, respect, and courage touched your heart, click the subscribe button below and join our community for more inspiring stories like this one. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives of service and unity.